Welcome back to Uncarcerated, the podcast. I am Justin.
And I am Taj.
And it's been a while since we've been together.
I know, it seems like years have passed by, man. We're sitting here, we're getting cobwebs.
It is. 2020 has been one of those years that already feels like it's been a decade. But the last, 3-4 weeks since we've been together have felt exceptionally long.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had some interruptions in service, so to speak. And it's like just a long, drawn-out nightmare.
It is. To briefly recap, because this isn't the focus, my wife and I got COVID. We're okay. We have some long-term breathing problems now, it seems, but we're fine. And then the country had an election.
yeah. In the middle of that, how dare they interrupt? But yeah, first of all, I'm really glad that you and Sandra are doing much better.
Thank you.
COVID is no joke. We all know that. We all have friends and colleagues that have suffered from it, and so I definitely was, concerned.
Thank you.
For you guys, but glad that you guys are on the upswing. So
thank you very much, man. Yeah, and speaking of on the upswing, America.
Man, it was interesting, Justin. It was for a hot 5 minutes. It seemed touch and go there.
It did. That was the longest week. I was in bed with COVID, watching CNN for 72 hours.
Yeah. I mean, it was bad enough what we were going through psychologically as a culture, just with COVID itself.
Yeah.
But then here comes this election. I think people lost a lot of water weight waiting for this thing to play out for sure. So
definitely. And it's funny because I feel like, and this is going to get to I think what we wanted to talk about today, but the country I think took this huge hard right 4 years ago. And I feel like it's sort of an even bigger shift in some ways. This is a huge move.
Yeah, I don't know if it was such a hard right. I think it was maybe a drunken sort of turn. So,
I'm going this way, guys. You can't tell me what
just
to do.
Leaning. You know how you just start leaning, and all of a sudden you start going in this direction. And then so the overcorrection, I think, is what happened. With what we saw with the election. So it'll be interesting to see now where we go. To be honest,
I got to give you credit. When Kamala Harris was announced as Joe Biden's running mate, we recorded an episode, and you said Biden's going to win.
Yeah.
You called it, and I didn't believe that was going to happen until days after the election.
Well, I got to be honest. There was a point in time last year, where I was almost so disillusioned with the Democratic Party that I really thought that they were just giving the election away. I felt like there was just a lackluster performance from potential candidates and no real formulation of a platform other than let's beat Trump.
Right.
And that was horrible strategy because, first of all, Trump is already the incumbent. He's already ahead of the game.
Right.
And
very few incumbent presidents running for a second term lose.
Yeah. And so, and I think, there's the thing about there's a Trump factor that has not changed with America. And so I felt like they were going to lose. But slowly but surely, Trump began shooting himself in the foot more and more, and then really with the onset of COVID and his early blunders, not even the disinfectant blunder, but even right at the beginning, I began seeing he's going to lose the elections.
It's kind of remarkable how close it was, in my opinion, actually. Given the state of the country, I mean, I remember, some stock market average hit 30,000 last week.
Right.
There are fucking bread lines across the country right now, right? But the narrative is that the economy's doing good.
Yeah.
The economy's doing great. You're okay, and that seems to be so powerful to enough people that they ignore the 200,000 plus deaths from COVID.
Yeah.
A president who has repeatedly demonized and denigrated everyone who doesn't look like him.
Right.
Who has done nothing that the scientific community has wanted the United States to do in response to the pandemic.
Right.
And frequently talks shit about the guy he has in charge of his pandemic response.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought.
And it was still pretty close.
Yeah, and here's I thought for a while I thought there would be a real repudiation of him, except I was trying to look back in history and see if there was one. There kind of was one presidential history with Woodrow Wilson. It is how Warren Harding actually became president. It was really sort of a subtle repudiation of him. If Woodrow Wilson was pretty much really racist, so for Warren Harding to become president, his own Woodrow's own party had to really disavow him a little bit, and that's what ended up happening. And so Woodrow Wilson became this sort of last minute candidate, and he ended up winning in a landslide victory. And so it was seen as a repudiation, but when you really look at it, it really wasn't. Like I said, he was a last minute candidate, and Woodrow Wilson in a lot of ways reminded me of Trump. Okay. He was a lot of hubris, a lot of narcissism. And so I thought, as I said, because Woodrow Wilson became the president, Harding became the president, I was like, wow, we might repeat history and really repudiate him. And then I started studying that presidential history a little bit more in depth, and I was like, whoa, nope, nothing much has changed. We're still as much as the president is a cornball, he's a reflection of us,
Yeah, that's the saddest part of this. Actually.
Yeah, and so I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that so many people voted for him. I'm not surprised how the numbers shook out. I think there is some hope in some of the numbers. One thing I did tout confidently was I thought that one of the most important factors was going to be the black female vote.
Oh yeah,
I think black women, especially 2 years ago in Alabama, that was sort of a marker. So the Southern black woman vote, I think, was the most key thing about this whole election. So
yeah, to call one person in particular out, Stacey Abrams put in some amazing work.
Yeah, in Georgia and a lot of the other cities really, the black cities really, like Philly and Detroit, they really whooped Trump's behind.
Oh yeah.
And so I felt like it was fitting. What Arizona did, I think, was fitting in the spirit of John McCain.
Absolutely.
So there was some comeuppance a little bit.
I was reading something about the voter turnout on some of the reservations in Arizona being higher than it had ever been before.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of the ways Trump's response to the pandemic has been to people living in those reservations, it's just been inhumane. It's putting it way lighter than you could. So it seems like a collection of people who had been most denigrated by the president.
Right. Finally got to have their say. Yeah. And it gave me some hope, because I thought for a long time, I think, like, for example, the Hispanic support of Trump was absolutely absurd. It has grown and during his tenure, and I was appalled. I was like, this is a guy who campaigned on an anti-Hispanic rhetoric, and yet he saw a growing base of Hispanic support. And I sort of understand it from an economic standpoint, but at some point I think you have to just stand up for yourself, and you stop letting somebody just step all over you for the sake of money and popularity. And I think some people woke up to that, I think.
That's an interesting point, and one I think that can apply to some of the things that people coming out of prison experience, which is that, like, to survive in prison requires a certain amount of acceptance of your powerlessness. Yeah. And that can become that can run pretty deep. So when you get out, you don't feel like it's your place to do a lot of things. Right. And the process of becoming, like, enfranchised member of society again, like to signing the social contract, can be unnatural, not just because you've never done it before, but because you just had this long experience of like being pretty explicitly clear about you don't belong here.
Yeah.
And so when people do kind of take that power back, like you love to see it.
Yeah, it's an amazing. It's almost transformative. I always harken back in my mind to the end of The Wiz, where the flying monkeys finally take off their suits, and they it's themselves underneath. And there's this beautiful, especially in the. I saw The Wiz on Broadway when I was a kid. And that dance number at the end is just an amazing thing, but it's so transformative when you see people just say, "Hey, I'm not gonna be a flying monkey anymore and follow orders." The witch is dead, and now I can be myself.
When I was a kid, I saw Cats on stage and learned a very different lesson.
Cats is I can see that.
Yeah.
I don't. I saw half of Cats. I saw half of it. So,
was it the tail or?
Yeah, the tail end. This is horrible. We're spinning out of control thanks to Justin's horrible sense of humor.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
But yeah, I think that is the beauty of America. I think if we want to say, maybe in a nutshell, is when you take your power back and stand up for yourself.
And you kind of, sometimes it takes these huge leaps of faith, right?
Yeah.
And I know before we started recording, you and I were talking about, things we've done in our own lives that have sort of like defined the future of our lives.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, Taj.
Okay.
Yeah. What's the biggest move you've ever made?
Ooh.
Logistically, spiritually, whatever.
The biggest move. Well, okay. Logistically, the biggest move I ever made was really when I first bought my house.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, I was at the time I bought my house, I was fresh out of prison. I got out of prison in August of '96, and I bought my house in November.
Okay.
So
wow, that's quick.
It was very quick.
Yeah.
I had I had gotten married, and about a year before I got out, and I had so when I got out, I was moving into a ready-made family. I had 4 stepkids, and I had a baby on the way.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife lived in a 3-bedroom apartment. It was time, she was thinking, we need, we got a kid coming, we need some space. And so she did most of the legwork because I was in the halfway house and I was working 6 days a week.
Right.
But she found a house. It was beautiful. And so speaking the election at the time, I inexplicably was working for President Clinton at the time. I was actually his polling manager. And so on the night of the election, we were moving. We had signed for the house 2 days before. And so that night, that day, my wife started moving with my sister-in-law, and then my sister-in-law had a bad tooth and it erupted, and my stepkid who has autism locked himself in the car, which took about 4 hours for him to even get out of. And so it was a disaster. And so my wife called me while I was at work, and it was election night, and we saw the results, and we were like celebrating because Clinton was getting reelected, which actually meant we would actually have some jobs.
Yeah.
And so we were celebrating, and she called and said, "Hey, I need your help because I can't finish this move." And so I called up a couple of my friends, and we all jumped in a car and went. And I had a limited amount of time because I was in the halfway house, so I had a curfew. So we all piled in the car. Yeah,
Florida better report quickly because I got to check in.
Yeah, I had to get to the apartment. We all rode to the apartment, finished packing this big U-Haul, and then my friend drove the U-Haul. He didn't have a license, so I was like, "Bro, just get us to the house. It doesn't matter." And then between me and my 2 friends, we unloaded this big-ass U-Haul and took everything into the house. It took us 45 minutes to make a move from the apartment to a house, and it was just an amazing thing. We still talk about it to this day. It was so crazy. Yeah, it was huge. That day was epic in terms of what happened, all the disasters and things like that we had to adapt to. And I made it back to the halfway house in time and woke up feeling pretty good about myself. New house and.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up question.
Sure.
So you you get out, you within a couple of months, you're buying this house. What made you feel that you could accomplish that? You know what I mean?
I don't know, because I was really in a lot of unknown. I had never bought a house before. It was my first house.
Yeah.
And I just had a sense of duty. I had to have a place for my child and for my wife and for my stepkids. I had a sense of purpose already in terms of I knew, I was out and I was adjusting to being free, but I had a really good job. It was an amazing sort of place where I found myself. So I just felt like things were happening around me that told me that I could do what I wanted to do and really achieve whatever I set myself as a goal. You know what I mean?
That's the man. That message. I want to find a way to bottle that up and give it to people.
Yeah, it's I could never put my finger on it until I really, again, speaking of the president, I read Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope. The title alone, I mean, the book is really good. Not as good as his latest book, I heard, but that title really speaks that in order to sometimes just to have hope, it comes with an audacity, the idea that you do belong, the idea that I can get out of prison and work for the president of all people, that I can buy a house when people are struggling to find apartments.
Because it does feel sometimes, and this is not exclusive to getting out of prison. Sometimes it just feels like to have hope is to have disappointment.
Yeah,
You know?
but it is. But you're right, though. You're absolutely right. Because I think I have a personal philosophy that the world is built on disappointment. I think it's the fuel that makes the world run. But I think if you understand that, it's sort of the Buddhist sort of maxim that life is suffering.
And suffering
right?
begets change.
Now, we could all then just go and jump off of a building and say, life sucks. But if it's a truth, there's a wisdom in the fact that it is a maxim. If it is a rule and you accept that life is full of suffering, you also have to accept that there is life, though. And there still is joy, there still is accomplishment and victory. Life is still worth living. So, you do have to be disappointed. I mean, most of the time it's because we're dealing with people, and I think our nature is to let each other down anyway. We wouldn't be human if we didn't, fall short. More often than not, actually. So, I think it makes life worth living. I think it makes the idea of heaven much more, at least in my mind, appealing. In my belief, heaven is where there is no disappointment, but you can't appreciate that without having disappointment in the first place. So
You believe that that peace requires, struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes hand in hand.
I believe something similar. I mean, I believe that, learning and evolution and change requires suffering.
Yeah.
I think a lot about like what would my life have turned out like if I hadn't gotten addicted to drugs, if I hadn't gotten to prison. I don't think I'd be a really good guy.
Right. Right. There's a refining that happens with the human soul that happens with struggle and failure. There's no refining without. It's just like in refinery period. You got to apply a lot of heat, and you got to beat the impurities out of things. Sometimes you got to, but then the end product it becomes worth it. Maybe.
It can be. That I think is the sort of like the biggest problem with this, like with hardlining these beliefs, though, right? Is that like sometimes suffering breaks people.
Yeah.
And there is no recovery.
No, That's correct.
I mean, because I do believe that suffering is necessary for change,
Yeah.
but I also know that not everyone survives it.
No, yeah, and that's unfortunate because you would like to think that everyone would achieve a goal of
Yeah.
refinement, but some people do break. You're right.
Speaking of maxims, I mean, it's almost like in order to like be okay with this, you just have to kind of accept that life's not fair.
Yeah, but I don't. You do have to accept it. I
Yeah.
think that's the reality. I
Yeah.
think I think that it is what it is. You can find fairness. You can find some justice. Sometimes establish it yourself, but
You
there
can do
is-
your best.
Yeah, but there is the reality that it's not fair in the sense of there's no written rule that says good people have good lives or
Right, right.
good experiences, and it doesn't mean that
actually,
bad people have bad
A
experiences.
great example of this might be like the fact that we've both done some pretty terrible things,
Yeah.
at least very irresponsible socially,
Yeah,
and yet we're living pretty good lives now.
yeah. I mean, we've been given. I mean,
ready for it.
second
I knew it.
chances. Yeah. We've been given those things.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, maybe not deservedly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oftentimes, we've been. I know I've been the recipient of grace.
Yeah. Me too.
And so, but at the same time, I think we're being mindful of that, and then feeling like, that you can, give
Yeah.
it back.
We're about to take a small break for our plug. And speaking of big moves and big changes, you were talking to me about a book that sounds absolutely fascinating on
Yes.
this subject.
So my book that I want to recommend, my book recommendation for today's episode is a book by Isabel Wilkerson that's called The Warmth of Other Suns. The Warmth of Other Suns is a line from a Richard Wright poem. And it's about the South to North migration. It's a wonderful book, pretty chunky, but it traces.
Me too. That's all
Yeah,
right.
it traces three families that migrated from the South to various parts throughout the country. It's a wonderful, both a historical, anecdotal book. It's a great work. I highly, highly recommend it.
Cool. So we're going to plug that book on screen, and we'll be right back with the second half of the podcast. Welcome back to Uncarcerated, the podcast. This is the second half of the episode. That's when things get wild.
Yes, we are back and still rolling.
So we're talking about big moves we've made, changes we've made, and sort of in response to like this idea that the country has made a couple of significant changes recently.
Right.
And you were talking about purchasing a house, like just a couple months after you got out.
Yeah.
My experience with purchasing a house took a little longer.
Okay.
But I also I own a home now. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And it was, for me, terrifying. I think some part of me had like deeply accepted that like I would probably live in an apartment the rest of my life.
Okay.
If that. let
Like,
me back it up.
like, I'm glad I got out the tent. Yeah.
Yeah, Catholic Charities.
Yeah.
But I remember it was one of the times since I've been out where I felt most totally out of place. Like signing legal documents on the 12th floor of some building to take possession and all this stuff. Like, I really felt like I was, in a movie. Like that it wasn't my life.
Right.
That was really a significant change for me. But not the biggest one for me personally. The biggest change I made, in my life, I think, is quitting drugs.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
That was the biggest move I made, and it's something that like, so I've been clean since May 12th of 2012, but it's something that like my extended period of use still, I still notice things, right? Because like there's like 15 years there where I wasn't learning any coping skills,
Right. Right.
and so now I'm in my mid 30s, and like there are things that should roll off my back that still don't, because I never, I don't have all the practice like dealing with life on those terms.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, Justin. If you can imagine what was scary mysterious or strange about owning a house, moving from an apartment dweller to home ownership. What's been scary about moving into a life of sobriety?
So for years it's hard to explain. Like, part of me really wanted to get clean, and part of me felt it was impossible.
Okay.
The scary parts were just not being intoxicated, I think, is the best way to describe what was most scary about it. Because at night when the drugs were wearing off, I would realize how miserable I was.
Right.
And then in the morning when I was miserable, the quest to erase that misery was all that consumed
That
me.
was your your daily goal. Okay.
And then I got the drugs, and I didn't feel so miserable anymore. And this was every day for years.
Right.
And so what was terrifying was like sitting with myself, being present. You know?
Right.
Like I had dreams of like things that I would love to do, but they were these narcissistic sort of like unrealistic dreams. Like, oh, yes, I may be a junkie right now, but I'm gonna be a rock star, famous author,
Right.
politician. Kind
Right.
of,
Right. Right. I'm gonna be Trump.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Gotta watch what I say. But yeah, there was that inclination, that I vacillated between just total narcissism and utter despair.
Okay. So then what would you, because I think you would recommend home ownership, right?
Yeah, I would.
To someone who's maybe questioning.
There are a lot of reasons that I think homeownership is great. The first is like simple economics, right? Like, as far as I understand it, mental health background, by the way. No, I've never taken an economics class in my life, but like, for what we pay for our mortgage, people pay for their apartments around here.
Right.
And like, you're not building any equity, right? Now the catch is, of course, that somebody loaned us a bunch of money.
You're on the hook for for that loan. So okay, so then what would you it's sort of in like spirit?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a weird question, but what would you recommend for someone? So again, someone's on the fence about owning a home.
Yeah.
It makes sense financially.
Yeah.
You feel better about having equity, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. So now you got someone that's on the fence about being sober.
Yeah.
Who's maybe at that point that you were in terms of questioning what is life going to look like sober? What do you tell that person?
Well, in my personal experience was to go back to something we talked about in the first half about suffering. I quit using drugs when, for a brief moment, I was able to appreciate the suffering I was causing others.
Okay.
And I couldn't even tell you why that was the day that happened, because there had been many worse days in my life. But for a moment, it was my mom, actually. I was able to appreciate what I was doing to her.
Okay.
And that was it.
So you had that moment of clarity.
I did. I had a moment where I actually experienced empathy.
Right. Okay.
Which had been elusive to me for a long time. And so, it's one of those things. I was at an AA meeting one time years ago, and this guy was like, if there was a pill I could take that would cure me of my addiction, I'd take 20 of them.
Right.
And I was like,
That you're still addicted, homie.
Yeah, like, oh my God. But I love that because, because there is no pill you can take to cure your addiction. There's
Right.
you can't slap the shit out of somebody and be like, get a hold of yourself.
Right.
Although it would be awesome if that was how it took. I don't know how to translate that into ways to help people. I don't know what to say to somebody. I hate the fucking, well, I would never say anything. I just listen kind of
Right.
response. I mean, there's definitely some truth to that. Like, yeah, I do try to listen because I can't convince anybody of much of anything. I can help people understand their own experiences by asking questions that cause them to reflect on them.
Right.
And you hope that one of those questions causes somebody to be like, well, I guess it's not impossible. Or I am destroying people's lives. But these are things people already know. All you're trying to do when you're communicating with them in our role here is to help them understand what they already know.
Let me ask you this, because I did own my house very quickly. It was a matter of just a couple of months, like maybe about 3 months,
Right.
honestly. Do you think with For example, the guy, I can appreciate him saying if there was a pill, I'd take it, right?
Oh yeah.
Because he wants the shortcut.
Right.
So there's that shorter journey, so to speak. Is there a short journey to sobriety? Does that journey have to be a lifelong struggle, or do
Yeah.
you think somebody can just wake up one day and just stop using?
That's a great question. To some extent, it's different for everybody, which is a shitty answer when you're looking for solutions.
Right.
But so there's research. There's evidence that shows that, look, if you remove people from their situation for a lengthy period of time, months, and you put them in someplace supportive, that works with them emotionally, whatever, helps them begin to sort out past traumas they may have experienced and the trauma that they experienced while using, that has a statistically significant impact on their ability to remain clean.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this approach to like substance use treatment is prohibitively expensive, and most of the people in these situations cannot afford it.
You're right.
And they can't even come close to affording it.
Right.
So yeah, there are solutions to these sorts of things that have been researched and proved to be effective, at least statistically significantly effective. Like nothing's 100%
Right.
with mental health, but it's inaccessible. Yeah. It's so
the reason
fucking
why
frustrating.
I know, no, and the thing is, the one thing, and when we come back maybe to our theme that we started talking about, when I do think about people who migrated from the South to the North, when I think about Harriet Tubman, when I think about many other escaped slaves, I think about the gentleman who mailed himself to Philadelphia, literally put himself in a box.
Wow.
And got into a box, and he got put on the train, and they said, to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And life is suffering, so of course, the box was put in upside down, and so he had to, escape slavery upside down in a box. Almost dead by the time that they had opened, the box, and I'm sure cramped and just miserable.
Yeah.
And I think about these people who had this idea of, I'm gonna leave home, what I know is home, all I know, especially about this country, even if I was, say, a slave that was captured and brought from Africa and deposited here. I'm going to leave this place, leave my family, and go to quote unquote North, which is a place they had never seen before. They had only heard stories of.
Yeah.
And they just knew it was freedom.
Yeah.
And they still journeyed there,
Yeah.
not knowing where it was. If I follow the North Star,
Right.
then maybe I'll come across a city with a bunch of freed slaves,
Right.
and that means I know I'm home. There's no guarantee that they'll make it. And of course, the people that they're leaving, which I also thought was interesting, did not want them to go.
Okay.
Thought that they were, there was actually a made-up mental abnormality called drapetomania to explain why a person would want to be what runaway slaves did.
Right.
Why a person would want to escape. They thought this was a mental problem. And yet, despite all of that, a person went up and just leave. And one of the most powerful things you could do sometimes is just go.
Right.
Migrate somewhere. So that question of where you're migrating and not knowing where that is, not knowing what home ownership really is when all you lived is in an apartment,
Right.
and maybe sometimes in a basement or
Right.
on the streets sometimes.
I paroled to a basement.
Yeah, I mean, and yet this was your life,
Right.
know, and you're like, but one day I'll own a home. I don't know what the hell that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Or one day I'll vote, or
Right.
one day I'll maybe run for office. I don't know what that's going to look like. But people have been able to do it with that audacity, I guess, that gray area of where am I going to move, and then try to make this place that I haven't even gotten to yet home, so to speak.
We're going to take one quick break to sort out a sound issue. So we're back after that quick break there because we had a little sound issue.
Yes.
You're spitting some fucking great wisdom today.
Well, I think it's the coffee mostly.
What kind of coffee we got?
Yes, and 7-Eleven has great coffee, by the way. Better than, really, honestly, better than Starbucks. But
significantly cheaper too, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Cheap things just taste better because you're like, I still have money.
Right, right. No, but I've always appreciated that people historically have felt at the need to leave home or what they thought is home or what they knew is home and venture off to go somewhere else that in their mind is better. And sometimes our biggest failure is when we fail to do that. There's almost a stagnation that occurs. I think the election, because we started this off by referring to the election. I think that what happened in this country is a reflection of that. That at some point we just got comfortable with where we were with the stupidity, and maybe even entertained it. We appreciated entertaining the idiocy of Trump. He was a train wreck. And yet, you almost can't help looking at it. You know how frustrating it is on the highway when there's a little accident on the side, it's off on the side, and yet traffic is backed up, and you're wondering, you're like, oh my God, people must be dead. And then when you get to it, the spot, you're like, what the hell did people slow down for? And yet, it's human nature. We still kind of, instead of saying, hey, I got a place to get to, we watch these train wrecks, so to speak. And I think that's kind of what happened. I think at some point we said, hey, it's time to put that train wreck on the side and keep moving. Because, no matter what, Justin, we still have a big question. There still is a big question about where we're going.
Right.
Okay, we got rid of Trump.
Yeah.
But now what?
I mean, the people, the Americans are still the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, black young men are still going to get shot.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the next big one. We just already had a couple of them in the news already. I'm just waiting for the next one that gets caught on camera.
Right.
So we're always waiting for the other foot to drop. I'm just waiting for Biden to say something fucked up.
Yeah.
Or Kamala to say something stupid, or we're just waiting. So then maybe the waiting part is just as bad.
It sounds like you've lost faith in our people, in America, or maybe you never had it.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. I didn't. I've been jaded for too long, Justin. And maybe there are glimpses of hope that I feel good about.
That you had the audacity to have.
Yeah. But I'm waiting for people to surprise me, I guess. I saw it a little bit with, because look, I said I worked for President Clinton. I also worked for President Obama. And I was working for him when he was a candidate. And I'm going to tell you, when I first started working for him, I was not confident. I had friends of mine that convinced me that he was a good candidate, because I was just like, and it wasn't that I didn't know much about him, to be quite honest, other than his speech at the DNC. But I just had no hope in America. I was my first thing out my mouth when my peoples came to me with the possibility of working for him. I was like, America's not going to vote for a black person.
Let me ask you something, because I actually, I feel like we know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
I actually think of you as a hopeful guy. Is that not accurate?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, Justin, you don't know me at all.
Fuck.
I'm much more stoic these days. I've learned to be that way. I just let things. I've allowed in my mind. I let things happen, and then I worry about how I think about them. But I don't. I give people. I do have. Let me take that back a little bit. Let me walk it back a little bit.
Yeah.
I have hope in people because I want it for myself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what I want for myself is to be a better person.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if I of all people have that desire,
Yeah.
I think I hear your story, Justin, and if you had the desire in the midst, the muck and mire of your addiction,
Yeah.
you still had the idea that you could be clean.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's an overnight thing. It didn't just, I'm just going to be clean. Sure, you had a moment of clarity,
Oh yeah.
but your empathy is a part of who you are. I think that I've always had this idea of I can be better.
Yeah.
And I think if I can, then I think logically I have to allow that for other people. But I'm much more stoic than hopeful because I've seen a lot of disappointment, and I'm okay with it. I have to be, and so that I think that's how I look at the world.
I can appreciate your answer to that, absolutely. And I didn't. I actually get some hope. Let me put it like this. Maybe I'm just projecting because I feel more hopeful like when we interact. Not just because of who you are, but because of what you do, and because of what the work and because of the work we do.
Right.
I think that. So I do believe that like suffering is necessary, and is a part of life and is required for change. But I think that what we do requires a certain amount of hope. I mean, maybe not hope, maybe faith, that like we can make a difference.
Yeah.
You know, because like in some ways, and I've always kind of struggled with this. Like, it's a tough line to walk between acceptance and activism.
Right.
Right? Because like on the one hand, like I find myself trying to practice as much acceptance as possible because like otherwise like I just rage against things and like nothing gets done and I'm worse off for it.
Okay.
But then like I do this work because I believe on some level that like I can have a positive impact on things. That
Right.
I believe that I can make the world a better place, even if it's just incrementally.
Yeah.
And I say even if it's gonna just be incrementally, if
Right,
at all.
right,
Like,
right.
I'm not a revolutionary,
Right.
you know. But like, I guess that's what what I was thinking when I said that I think of you as a hopeful person because like, when I'm surrounded by people who also give a shit, who also believe that they can make the world a better place, I feel like not only does my desire to do that increase, so does my faith in my ability to do it.
Right.
And so like the experience of like recording these podcasts and hanging out with you is one in my mind of hope.
Word. I can appreciate that. I really do. And I hope I wasn't dashing your hopes at all. I think
Taj, you're always dashing.
well, I think we're I think we're all like planters, right? Like Johnny Appleseed in the sense of we want to plant things and we want it to grow for only one reason, because we can't eat all the apples ourselves.
Right.
We want other people to partake, and we do think that the world will be a better place for it. And so the effort to plant the seeds and water and do all of those things certainly lend themselves to that goal and that optimism, which I think is part of nature in and of itself. I don't think that we're just all here to do whatever in a haphazard, random way. And so I do think the human spirit moves in a certain way. It has a certain nature. I think it's inclined towards good. And I think that it becomes, it's our job to refine it, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so we refine it through these acts of kindness, mercy, through our own example, because you can't do any type of good without exemplifying it in your own life. That won't even make any sense, you know? So there's hope in that
a lot
sense.
of people do try to do that.
They try, but they always fail. I'm telling you.
And you can usually tell who's a bullshit.
They try, and sometimes they're convincing, but they always fail. I think it's inevitable. I think there's a written sort of sort of a failure, a fault.
Right.
In terms of what people do with that regard.
What's the saying is like faith without works is dead, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's dead.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I mean, that's the reality of it. It is straight up dead.
I don't know who said that. And the other day I said some quote and I was like, yeah, this is totally appropriate. And then I looked up who said the quote and it's like,
not even close to who you thought it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a bad guy.
Yeah.
Who said it. I'm like, fuck, dude.
I want to say that it was St. Paul.
Okay.
That should be correctly attributed,
Okay.
that particular quote. Yeah.
Well, I've driven through Minneapolis, so I feel like I can.
There you go.
I can quote.
Yeah, they're the home of the quote.
There we go. It's a Minnesota joke for those of you not familiar.
Yeah. You gotta stay catching up with us, man. We move pretty fast, man.
Shit. Man, when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I was like, I was watching something on YouTube, something brainless, and I was thinking about how I was wasting my time, and then I started thinking about, well, but I do good work, and like I'm doing my best. I deserve to watch this, and then I started to get angry and self-righteous about the people in this world who, like, that is their primary function, is consumption of this mindless sort of material.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, I wanted to come in here and be like, why aren't people angry? But I feel like the discussion we have, and I know this is just ridiculous, but and it's narcissism on my part. But I feel like the discussion we have had is much more useful in a lot of ways. Because I want people to watch me, you, Second Chance Center, everyone in the world who's trying to do something right, and feel like kinship, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be angry at people. Because it's not like I always believed I could do anything like this. I met Adam Abdullah, who's on our staff, like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was giving this presentation of this college class I was in. And he was talking about helping guys on parole. And you know how classes are. Everybody's tuning the fuck out. But I'm sitting there like wrapped because like I'm on parole.
Yeah, right.
and he's like, I did all this time of helping people. And like I went to school here. I was like, shit, I go to school here.
Right.
I did time. And like that sort of just nudged me. Because at the time I like was working as a welder. It's not like I had any aspirations for doing much. And I was like, I can do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I want this podcast to do.
Well, I hope it does. I hope it does. I think we both do.
Yeah.
And I think the randomness of things is not so overwhelming.
Yeah.
If I can make that a point. I do think that there is design to how things play out. And so Adam was at that point in time and place exactly where he needed to be for you to hear. To steer you away from whatever sort of mundaneness that you had going on.
Yeah. Stand-up comedy. That's what I would have done.
Yeah. So I think that tends to happen more often than not, Justin. There is where this is not for naught.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it does play out. Because we all have those stories of just randomness where somehow a person just happened to be at the right place at the right time and someone heard from you or they come back. I've had people come back to me years later after I said something or done something. I remember a story where I helped this guy who was interviewing this kid for a job. And I wasn't going to give him the job because it wasn't at all qualified and he wasn't ready to even for the process.
Right.
And I remember he had a crooked tie on, and I said, "Hey, come here. Like, I'm not going to hire you." I let him know, "Look, I'm not going to hire you, and I'm going to actually tell you why." And then I said, "And plus, this damn tie is getting on my damn nerves. Do you not know how to tie a tie?" And he was like, "No." And so I showed him. I said, "Look, this is how you do it. We practice it." And then I sent him on his way. And I'd say about 10 years later, man, this kid came up to me, was getting ready to graduate college. And he said, "Hey," and it was random because his brother worked with me I was working as a bouncer. I had like a security crew. And so I hired his kid brother.
Wow, yeah.
And he came to pick him up one day. And he was like, "Wait, that's the guy I've been telling you about, who helped me tie a tie 10 years ago, and so little stuff, somebody will look at this podcast and hear something that you and I say, and it'll motivate them to do something great. I think so. I wouldn't be surprised. And if it may not even be this podcast, it may be something else.
You sound pretty hopeful, Taj.
Well, maybe I'm more hopeful than I'd like to let on,
Maybe so. I mean, you are a Steelers fan.
Well, I don't need hope for that. That's inevitability. That's inevitability, bro. You know.
Right.
So I mean, look at us. We're undefeated and about
Yeah.
to, you know, if the Ravens stop getting the cooties, we will continue our undefeated season.
There we go. All right. Well, hey, it's been great to be back in here today. With you.
You know, it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
But this feels like we were just recording yesterday, bro.
We've come home.
I'm glad to be back and be back here with you, man.
Well, I hope everybody has a great day. I hope everyone's staying safe out there.
Yeah.
COVID's no fucking joke. I think my ability to breathe might be fucked up for a long time.
Well, look, you know, it's a lot of nature and a lot of cultural sort of how we acclimate to things, and so all of those things mix in. But it is a reality, and hopefully we can adjust and move into an area of unknown and become more familiar with it.
Do it together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Have a great week, guys.
Bye-bye.